a lesson today with a little different twist. We get a lot of lessons on why we should believe the Bible, and there are many great reasons. But today I want to look at why I, and therefore I believe all of us, um, should want to believe the Bible. It's a different thing. One is more like evidence based, and that's strong. But the other is a desire within our minds to want to believe the Bible as God's truth. So our objective today is to try to understand why we should want to believe the Bible and what are the benefits of it to us. Again, many sermons on why one should believe, but today, why one should want to believe. Abraham Lincoln said, and I'm paraphrasing, but he basically said he was a great student of human nature and a firm believer of the Bible, read it often and seriously. But he said once, people pretty much do what they want to do. So that's a simple statement, but really is so true. We just had the Olympics. In fact, some of it's still going on, and regardless of any political message from the Olympics, I admire the athletic skill of these mostly young people. And every time I see in swimming or in gymnastics or in running, I'm thinking of the hours and hours and hours of dedication, hard work, and skill that it takes to become an Olympian. I've known two Olympians in my life, and both of them were among the most intense, focused people that I've ever seen. One was a Greco-Roman wrestler, short guy, who later, believe it or not, went to law school, but then decided what he really wanted to do was fly jets in the Air Force. So he goes into the Air Force and, as an officer, goes to pilot training and shows up in my squadron in Okinawa back in the 80s. An intense young man. I flew with him a lot, and I had to rein him in. Just as I'll get back to the point here, but we used to take off, and as we came out of a populated area, we'd be at about 150 knots, about 160 miles an hour. He wanted to be at least 300 because what he was practicing for was the real thing. When you actually went to war, you want to take off and get out of there very quickly. I had to say, no, we can't do that in peacetime. So just to end that story, he left our squadron eventually. He goes to another squadron in Nevada where he was training pilots there. And the last I heard of him, he had lost his flying wings. He was grounded, as we say, because he'd been flying so low and so fast. He ran into a power line and cut. Didn't lose the airplane. Didn't have to bail out of it, but you don't recover from that. That was one of the Olympics. The other one actually was a fencer who was selected to be in the 1980 Olympics. And if you remember about that, that's the one that was canceled. It was supposed to have been in LA. The United States canceled their participation because the Russians had invaded Afghanistan the year before. And so the Americans withdrew. So all of his preparation, in essence, went to naught. That's just a sideline to tell you that to get to the Olympic level, it just has to consume your life. All of your waking hours, your schedule becomes around the preparation for whatever sport it is. And why are they doing it? They must want it strongly to go for the goal. They have to. They have to be willing to put in those hours of pain and preparation for the honor and the rewards, you could say, or the fulfillment. Isn't that much like the Christian? That the Christian has to really want it, to be able to discipline themselves, as Paul says, and be willing to give up whatever it takes if it conflicts with our principles of living for Christ. I think this explains why many Christians, in quotes, don't make an effort to attend services when they can, don't contribute as they need to, don't study as we should, don't care for the other Christians as we all should. There are many excuses, but many times the reason is that we simply don't want to do it. If we truly want to believe the Bible, it makes sense that we would be more diligent in seeking its truth by personal study, learning from other faithful brethren, hearing lessons from God's word, and associating with other Christians. First, though, I want to take just a few minutes, and this is going to be a short sermon today, but just to really review some of the reasons why we should believe the Bible, why reason and common sense within us would point us to a belief. One is that the Bible is unlike any of the contemporary books. It pictures mankind, men and women, as we really are. It doesn't sugarcoat. Even its heroes like Samson and Saul and David are pictured as they really are. Jeremiah 10:23 says, I know, O Lord, that a man's way is not in himself, nor is it in a man who walks to direct his steps. What does that say? It just says without God, we can't do it on our own. And we're talking about life on this earth. A person without God is a human wreck. Now, they might not be in prison. They may not be on drugs. They may not be thieves and burglars and other bad things. But spiritually, they really are a wreck because they can't direct their own steps. And then there become literally no boundaries on behavior and no shock at what they can do. I've lived long enough. I hate things that happen that I hear about, but it doesn't surprise me because without God, we can reach lower and lower and lower levels of depravity. Not too long before I moved up here, which has been 15 and a half years ago, I can't believe it. There was a young girl in Prattville, Alabama, that had a young baby, and she just couldn't cope with it. And I'm talking about you, very infant, and put this baby in a microwave to punish the baby. Now, how in the world can somebody get to that level? Well, just the last day or two, I've read of a young woman who threw her newborn baby into a trash can. So how does that get? You don't just get to that in a day. You don't wake up one day and say, I'm going to throw this baby in a trash can. That comes as a result of a depraved life of sinking lower and lower and lower to the point where you say, I'm going to do something like that. And that is when a world without God will breed people like a Hitler, who was responsible for, we say, at least 6 million Jews. All of World War II, which was started and sustained by Hitler, is estimated to, kill over 100 million people on all sides, civilians and soldiers alike. Pol Pot in Cambodia, you may never have heard of him. He's responsible for ethnic cleansing in Cambodia and killed an estimated 2 million people there. Saddam Hussein in our own lives, we remember him in Iraq, killed his enemies, tortured his enemies, and then led to a war which ended up killing many, many more. Started an unnecessary war against Iran that went on 8 years. It was so low key from 1980 to 1988 that the American press hardly covered it at all. But in the end, there's hundreds of thousands on both sides. And in the end, Iran was sending boys, 10, 11, 12 years old, to walk over the minefields, to blow up the mines so that the soldiers then could come into the cleared areas. It's just unthinkable. On October 7th of last year, Hamas goes into Israel and ends up killing at least 1,200 people, but in the most brutal of ways, shooting babies, beheading people, killing entire families, killing the parents in front of the children, killing the children in front of the parents, raping women, carrying them off, hundreds of them, into captivity. You say, how can this happen? It happens because they are people without God in a world largely without God. So the Bible pictures mankind in a real way. Romans 1:16 and following pictures man in his natural state, that is, without God and ignoring his guidance. And we're told there several times, at least 3 times, and God gave them up. God gave them up. God gave them up. We saw that over and over in Judges. And when that happens, the whole society collapses. There's still a few faithful people, but there's enough evil people in that society to tilt the society toward depravity and eventually to tolerating the depravity. The good people just simply try to stay out of the way of the chaos around them. And we see that today in parts of cities and certainly within other communities. So-called normal people. So-called, I put those in air quotes like my little 8-year-old granddaughter. I got to show you that sometime. Normal people, our friends, family members, co-workers who aren't out there creating chaos, but they are beset with fears and doubts. They live each day under this cloud and have no idea about the answers to life's greatest questions, such as, where did I come from? Uh, why am I here on earth? And where am I going after death? The existential, the big questions in life. They either have never asked them or ignore them if they hear them. I heard a story about a little boy named Billy. He's about 7 or 8 years old. And he comes up to his dad and mom one day and he said, where'd I come from? And they said, oh boy. And so they set him down for 20 minutes and they start talking about the birds and the bees and the puppies and the kitties. And, went on into all the detail, and the kid's just sitting there wide eyed. And the parents said, well, Billy, does that help you understand? He said, I don't understand all you were talking about, but all I want to know is where I came from. Johnny, my friend, said he was from Detroit, and I wanted to know where I came from. So, yeah, at least he's asking, okay, where did I come from? Well, the Bible accurately tells us that mankind is the highest of creations on earth and only a little below the angels. The Bible accurately describes man's personalities and emotions and motives, good, bad, and ugly. This just impresses me to no end. It reveals the jealousy of King Saul for David. We're going to be talking about that just very soon. David's lust for Bathsheba, which led to lying and murder and treachery by a man after God's own heart. So how could David do that? Because he had lost his focus on God. He was without God when he was doing that. Ruth's incredible love and devotion for Naomi on the other end of the scale. Your people will be my people. I will go where you will go. Deceit and hypocrisy in Ananias and Sapphira among the early Christians. And it had these thousands of people who come into Christ there in Acts 2, 3, and 4, and 5. Thousands in Jerusalem. And then you have Ananias and Sapphira. They had to have been sitting there plotting this. It's like, hey, Ethel, man, we got a bunch of money here from that stock sale. Let's give about 2% of it, but we'll represent it as being more. God knew they died because of their lie, but they also displayed hypocrisy and they paid for it with their life. We see the weakness of Peter, the great apostle Peter. And that's just one of the saddest events. And that phrase, and Jesus looked at Peter after Peter, had denied Jesus 3 times. I mean, you talk about a time where you'd want to go just end it all. Perhaps Peter felt that. But then Peter recovered, repented, and became one of the great apostles in the New Testament. The courage of Stephen, who goes to his death by the angry crowd, stoning, proclaiming that Christ is Lord. And the Apostle Paul, beaten, shipwrecked, but kept on going. So the good, the bad, and the ugly is all there in the Bible. Unlike contemporary stories, the Odyssey and the Iliad and so on, interesting stories, but have superheroes that are doing things like jumping over the moon and fighting the dragons and so on. The next thing the Bible does is shows us we should never confuse technological progress with social or spiritual growth in mankind. What am I talking about? All of us got this little thing now, right? This is tremendous computing power. There are computers in this thing, more so than what we had when we first went to the moon. And we think we're so advanced. We can talk anywhere in the world on this little phone. We've got supercomputers that can figure out many of the complexities of science and nature. And sometimes we think we're in such a modern world that humans themselves have come so far, have evolved. No. We still see man's inhumanity to man. What happened on October 7th in Israel is not that far different than what happened when the barbarians sacked Rome in the 4th century. They came in and they wiped out man, woman, and child in the cruelest of ways. So the Hamas attacks in Israel are as brutal as the ancient wars of the Greeks, Romans, and barbarians of 2,000 years ago. Only the weapons today are modern and kill more. We can kill not just hundreds, but thousands and tens of thousands with the hydrogen and atomic weapons and others that we have today. Will Rogers, many of you may not know him, but he was a philosopher. He was a comedian, and an author back in the 30s. He was extremely popular. He gave talks and shows and so on. And he just had a way. He was, I think, Oklahoma cowboy, but he had a way of plainly talking and describing things. And he talked in a drawl, like kind of like this. Forgive me, Will, but he said, "You can't say civilization don't advance, for in every war they kill you in a new way." And he's so true. We saw the Civil War, in which over 600,000 people died on both sides. Probably far more than that, because the counting was not real accurate back then. Millions died in World War I, and even more millions died in World War II with the advent of the airplane and bombing in a heavy way. So we just gotten better. We got better swords. We got better knives. We got better rocks that can just kill many, many people. But the motives and the emotions and the jealousies and the anger are still caused by those humans who haven't really changed their nature. Basic human nature has not changed since the days of Adam and Eve, Cain and Abel, and the great flood. Evil abounds in the absence of following God's word. The Bible accurately prophesied the future. That's another reason why we should believe it. Those facts demand an answer. If anybody ever picks up the Bible and sees the number of prophecies that have come and the detail in the prophecies that came forward, detailed prophecies concerning Jesus, and this just briefly, born in Bethlehem of Judea, as recorded in Micah 5:2. There were two Bethlehems, many of you know. There was a Bethlehem Ephrata, amazing. And then there was a Bethlehem of Judea right outside of Jerusalem. And that's where Jesus was prophesied to be born, and indeed was. He was born of David's seed, or his generations, Isaiah 9:6. He was betrayed for 30 pieces of silver, Zechariah of chapter 11. Rose from the dead with his own prophecy prior to the fact. And then dozens of others. We obviously have many, many sermons on that. Another one is the amazing details that Jesus gave about the destruction of Jerusalem, how it would come about, how the signs of the eagle, which was the Roman standard on its combat flags in 70 AD. The other accounts by an uninspired historian, Josephus, who lived and had been in the Roman army, even though he was a Jew, verified the accuracy of the Matthew 26 prophecy, that essentially no stone was left on top of another one after the Romans destroyed it. They just wanted to destroy the city so that it wouldn't be repopulated. The prophecies about the apostasy of Christians, which led to further and further separation from the New Testament teachings of Christ and the apostles, that eventually led to the formulation of what was later became Catholicism. Catholicism just simply means the universal church in Latin. The 1 Timothy 4 account he said Paul is prophesying that there will be people who abstain from meat and begin teaching abstaining from meat, and forbidding to marry. Those were just two elements that later became a dogma within the Catholic Church, particularly for the priest, and forbidding to marry. Acts 20 talks about the corruption of the eldership, and that is exactly where the early corruption and apostasy came in the eldership. Many people today want to dispute these facts, and such as the resurrection, but the time to refute them, and I taught on this about 3 weeks ago, the time to refute the facts was then, at the time it occurred and shortly thereafter. And Paul says in Galatians, over 500 people saw the resurrected Christ. And the Romans, as Paul mentioned, or as Mike mentioned today, not Apostle Paul, but Apostle Mike. Now, Mike says the Romans were very good at crucifixion. They were experts. And when they intended to kill somebody on the cross, not just Jesus, they did it in a certain way. And so the resurrection of Christ was seen not by just his apostles, but by hundreds of people. And Paul in Galatians says most of them are still alive. They can verify the resurrection. And this great movement that undoubtedly started out in the early into middle first century undoubtedly grew to what we know collectively as quote unquote Christianity today. Its beginnings were right then after the lifetime of Christ. We must answer to ourselves why the Bible and Christianity have been so influential, and it has been. They have been. Patrick Henry, one of the patriots in the Revolutionary War era, said, "The Bible is worth all other books which have ever been printed." George Washington, remember him? It is impossible to rightly govern the world without God in the Bible. Impossible, he says. That may be acting out right now in the United States as the bulk of people deny God and the culture declines. It may prove to be impossible to rightly govern the world without God in the Bible. Abe Lincoln, another quote, says, "I believe the Bible is the best gift God has ever given to man. All the good from the Savior of the world is communicated to us through this book." I want to throw this in very quickly here. People who are not Christians do a lot of good things. Sometimes it's charity work. They're helping in the prisons. They're helping the poor, and so on. And they may be atheists or they may be agnostics and never have picked up a Bible. But the good things of the world have their roots within the Bible. Treating a neighbor like you would want to be treated. They may give you a blank stare if you said that was the golden rule of the Bible. They'd say, "I don't know. That's the way I treat. I'm treating my friends here like I would want to be treated." But that moral code stems from the teachings of Christ and the apostles. So let's move now quickly to why I think we should want to believe the Bible. And now I'm appealing to the emotion, why we should want to do this. And as a consequence, be glad and happy and yes, proud in a good way that we are believers in the Bible. The Bible teaches the dignity of man as one made in God's image and thus elevates the entire status of humanity, of mankind. We are not highly evolved animals, but a distinctly different form of creation, a body with a soul. Now, some humans display animalistic activities in attacking and that of other people. But God created us as a body with a soul that is not animalistic. And He created us with a freedom of choice to understand good and evil and to participate in the good and shun the evil. And those choices confront us every day of our life. Here's what I know I should do, but here's what I want to do. And it's that Bible. Now, that's not just us. That's Paul. He goes through a lengthy dissertation. The very thing that I would not do, I do. We describe that as God, as Paul speaking, quote, as every man. But I believe it's the human Paul talking about the wars that go on in his own mind. Genesis 1 shows the man as the offspring of God himself. And God breathed into Adam, first man, and Adam and the rest of human beings became a living soul. We need to contemplate, because we don't see it in the mirror. I didn't see it this morning when I shaved a little bit, but there's a soul inside that old body. And the body is aching and decaying and creaking, and it's going to fade. But the soul, for good or evil, will live beyond this body. We are capable of thought and questioning, where did I come from? Not like just little Billy who want to know what town he's born in, but where we came from, why we're here, and what will be our future. I don't think porpoises, and they're smart, are sitting around thinking, how did I get in this ocean? Why am I in this ocean? Where am I going after I, wash up on the shore and die? Or the elephant, considered one of the smartest and with the greatest of memories, sitting around in the pack, and said, hey, Ethel, how did I get in this jungle, and down here by this water bank? And why am I constantly avoiding these crocodiles that want to nip at my feet? And when one of those crocodiles finally gets me and kills me, where do I go then? It just doesn't happen. There's a gigantic gap between the most intelligent of animals and mankind. They just are. Anyone with any sort of logic would see that. But what atheists and evolutionists want to say is, look at that ape there. He looks like he's reading that book. He does. I mean, he's punching that computer, and I could teach him to recognize 100 words. It's like training a dog to go get the paper. I mean, that ape is not sitting there contemplating these questions. How'd I get into the zoo? How'd I get out of this zoo? And where am I going when I get out of this zoo and finally get hit by a Mack truck? No, they don't do it. But humans do. Rene Descartes, and you may or may not have heard of him. He was a philosopher in France, but he's also a great mathematician. But he says, I think, therefore I am. That's a familiar passage, many people. I think, therefore I am. The consciousness of our thinking tells us every waking moment that we're human, that we are different from every other species of creation. The only quote unquote alternative, evolution, is just full of leaks and inconsistency. And the media covers this up, but evolution has taken a lot of hits in the last 40 to 50 years. Now, Kevin O'Banion and others do a great job on this. I'm certainly not an expert on it. But evolution, as taught by Darwin and scientists later on, is just being ridden with holes now with the discovery of DNA and things which are have to be completely assembled to be able to work. I'll just say that. So it's like an engine in a car. Engine in the car will not work without the carburetor. So that, but think of an animal that says, well, I need a, quote, carburetor. I'll take a few billion years to develop a carburetor. No, because the animal will not work without all of its parts. And that's the same, that's what we see in DNA. I'll leave it there. First life, but with all of our supercomputers, first life cannot be created. All such experiments with life start with some form of living matter. In many cases, it may only be a cell or a molecule, but it starts with something that already has the spark of life. The creationist was arguing with the evolutionist, and the evolutionist says, well, you give me some dirt, and acting over time and with all of the forces, and give, billions of years, I can create, a cell. And the creationist says, yeah, but you're going to have to get your own dirt. Where did that dirt come from? Either life is eternal and has always been, or material is eternal and has always been. Take your pick. The Bible says that life came from God. Transmutations of evolution species. So often the focus, and we've all seen it in our science book, the picture of the ape, it's walking around like this, and the next picture shows him a little more upright, and it keeps on going, and now you got a man, in a suit. And the intention of that is to brainwash students to say, yeah, don't you see how that ape down there who was crawling around in the trees over billions and billions of years developed into this mankind? There's simply no evidence of it. But that misses the fact that if evolution were true and started with a single germ of life, all plants and all animals would have had to have come from that. So there would have to be missing links between the bird and the fish and the mammal, and then the mammal to man. See, the emphasis is on the so-called missing link between the ape and mankind, which just dilutes the whole argument. Let me ask you this: was Jesus just a higher form of evolved animal? Think about that. No. So the Bible cannot be true if evolution is also true. What we call macroevolution in any form cannot be made to compromise with the Bible's account of creation. Now, do animals evolve in a micro sense? Yeah. Cats and different species of dogs and so on, they change with time, but that's within the species. But the dog doesn't evolve into a horse over time. The elephant does not, evolve into a rhinoceros. They are completely different species. Moving on. The Bible teaches that humans, you and I, are made for a purpose. It's not just to get up on Monday and go to the grocery and restock our, supplies for the week. That helps keep the body going. The body and the humans are not just for fulfilling the bodily desires for food, water, companionship, reproduction, etc. Psalm 50 verse 11. Everything that moves is mine, the psalmist says, speaking of God. Psalm 33:8. Let all the inhabitants of the world stand in awe of him, for he spoke and it was done. He commanded and it stood fast. I could multiply these kinds of passages, but the earth and everything in it is God's, including you and me. A verse that really capsules this, I believe, is Romans 12:1 and 2, familiar to many of us. I urge you, therefore, brethren, this is Paul writing to the Romans, by the mercies of God, to present your bodies a living and holy sacrifice, acceptable to God, which is your spiritual service of worship. For the Christian, then, we belong to God, we are God's, our time is God's, our resources is God's. All that we have comes from God, and we have it on loan, in essence, for the time that we are here. So when I, make a contribution or back to the Lord, I'm just giving back some, portion of what He has given. Perhaps never before has the human body been so abused, displayed, and harmed as we see it today. And I say that because of the technology there. The internet, the movies, all of that is able to distribute this filth throughout literally the known world. It is amazing to me to see people in Europe, Asia, everywhere else that virtually all of them have the smartphone now. I mean, it's 80 to 90%. And so all of this filth can be easily distributed. Drugs follow drugs in search of a quote better high. Fentanyl now is killing roughly 70,000, mostly young Americans, a year. It is the most common cause of death now for people of age from 18 to 45. Now, we kill about 100,000 Americans total every year just from overdosing of all kinds of drugs, painkillers, and so on. But fentanyl is a synthetic drug. It doesn't occur naturally. It's compounded, and the products are largely coming in from China. Fentanyl is made in Mexico, and it's pouring over the southern border and now the northern border. And people don't understand, but enough fentanyl on the tip of that pin is enough to kill you. And so many times a young person is looking for a high, but it takes something with fentanyl in them and they're gone. I mean, it's one time, it's one and done. At least with marijuana, you had to smoke enough of it over a few years to make you nuts or crazy. But fentanyl now is killing young people, good young people, I say that. But they're experimenting with stuff and they're gone. New standards of nudity, pornography, and perversion are being sent over the internet. Kindergartners, 5, 6 years old, and grade schoolers are being brainwashed about gender identity. Yeah, Billy, you think you're a boy, but you like to play with dolls. Let's change your gender. Let's mutilate you in surgery and put you on drugs that will quote unquote change you from Billy, to Jilly, or yes, or Jill. Not many Jillies are. It is unbelievable. And these surgeries are extremely expensive. And so there's the profit motive by doctors and hospitals. The armed forces in the last 4 to 5 years have now allowed people to come into the military. Just read on this week. Come into the military, sign up, right? Immediately get gender altering surgeries, which puts them out of whack for 9 months. I mean, out of service. You can't send them overseas. You can't really train them. So they're now basically sitting in the barracks, maybe showing up for some lectures for 9 months. And then they have to have medicines which have to be available around the world for them to be able to deploy to the Middle East, Europe, or whatever. 20 years ago, my daughter was actually awarded an ROTC scholarship for the Air Force. But she has a slight high thyroid condition, takes one little pill, as I've been doing for years and years. And she was eliminated from competition, well, from getting that scholarship, because you can't ensure that little thyroid pill is going to be available in the deserts of Afghanistan or the mountains of Iraq or whatever, wherever they have to go. So, change. So now someone can come in, get the gender altering surgery at thousands, hundreds of thousands of dollars, spend a couple of years in the military, get out, get the GI Bill, and have free education in our colleges and so on. That's how far we've come. 1 Corinthians 6:13, the body is not for immorality, but for the Lord, and the Lord is for the body. 1 Corinthians 6:18, flee fornication. Every sin that a man doeth is without the body, outside the body. But he that committeth fornication sinneth against his own body. Next thing, the moral code. Now, not overlooking the plan of salvation, but the moral code, particularly of the New Testament and of Christ, is the highest moral code in the world. The golden rule, so-called, do unto others as you would have them do unto you, is the highest of moral code. Now, the other religions, other cultures have moral codes, such as this: do unto others as others do to you. Follow that? So you cheat me, I can cheat you. You steal from me, I can steal from you. That's a fairly high code, because it says I won't steal from you, or I won't lie to you unless you first do that to me. That's a moral code of retaliation. So, Mike, if Ruth Ann is mean to you one morning, I know that never happens. That's why I can use it. Then, Mike, you can turn around, and be mean to her. But the golden rule: do unto others as you want them or wish them to, as you would have them do unto you. You can't get any higher. So, in the same situation, Ruth Ann gets up one day. She's really mad and mean to Mike, but the Christian in Mike says, I will treat her as if she is good to me, and I will treat her as I know she would want me to treat her, not with retaliation. Imagine if everyone in a culture would follow that. What a society that would be. The Bible teaches that we will live after death. And let me make this point. Just as a person, who would you rather live next door to? Someone living under that moral code, or somebody totally without God, where anything goes. Maybe they'll lie, they'll steal, they'll cheat, and do whatever else they wish. The Bible teaches that I will live after death. I really like that. I really want to see my mom again and my dad. I really want to see my brother, who basically died at birth. It was described as the most beautiful little boy. And the doctor didn't get out there in time. The cord was tied around his neck in an old country. Doctor couldn't get there, and so he died. I've told that story. Love to see him. I know he'll be there. So the Bible tells us that this world is not all there is. I really like that. It's not just some dark curtain at the end after death. It's not like so-called rover and dead all over. That's a terrible phrase. But unlike animals who just die and decay and are gone, we have a soul. Now, the consequences, if you don't believe in the afterlife, then there is no real incentive for right living, other than maybe the fear of retaliation. So I won't slap you, Mike, in the face, because he might come back with a sword to the head. And so that has a restraint on my activity. That's a restraint. It's really the law of jungle, is what that has in effect. So there would be no incentive for right living. Eat, drink, and be merry would be the order of the day, because there would be no real repercussions after death. It is no coincidence, people, that with Darwin's teaching on evolution in the 1860s and 70s, that was like immediately grabbed on by agnostics and people from an evil persuasion. A fellow in Germany, you may or may not have heard him, by the name of Nietzsche, took that and just basically said man is a higher form of animal. Killing another human is like killing a dog. And so that it has a direct line into the thinking of Adolf Hitler, who felt that Jews were subhuman and the world would be better off the more Jews we can kill and eliminate. There was a direct line from that to World War II. We see it in Ukraine today. People have no idea. I mean, it's not on the front pages, but Ukraine and Russia are killing each other, and thousands of people each week, and hundreds of thousands in total. Lastly, but closely related, the Bible teaches a better world than this life. On earth, everything ages. I don't know about you, but my knee is older today than it was a week ago. Some days you get up and everything hurts. I'm wearing out. We fade, we weaken with time. James 4:14 just gets it by saying you're just a vapor that appears for a little while and then vanishes away. If you've ever gotten up on a morning of high humidity, we've had a couple, and you look out the back window or whatever, and there's this vapor, 20, 30, 50 feet above the earth. That's going to just fade away when the sun comes out, like almost like that. And that's what he says, relatively speaking, life is. Yeah, we may live to be 80, 90. Some will live to be 100 or 115. But in relatively speaking, compared to eternity, it's a vapor. In heaven, there's no time, no clocks needed, no sickness, no sadness, no losses. My knees are going to be fine in heaven. I mean, Faye's going to be fine. You're going to be fine in heaven. It's all there. We gotta want it. We gotta want it. Um, we need to be looking in the Bible at how it's almost impossible to describe, and so many descriptions of heaven, even they're even difficult to understand. Of a city, of gold and streets of, precious jewels and so on. But we can understand that the Bible teaches we will see and we will know our departed loved ones in Christ. I really want to believe that, and I hope you do. Death is just a brief separation. I wrote in a song, it's a stairway to heaven's home. It's a process that we'll go through for the Christian. If we die as faithful Christians, we will see that land of heaven. We will be out of pain. We will be out of sickness. No more losses, no more fading. In heaven, we will see the likes of Noah. Can you imagine that? What a man. Builds that ark, follows God to the letter. Abraham set out to sacrifice his son Isaac. I still can't get my head around that, as Mike says. He was going to do it. He had raised the knife, and the angel stopped him. Joseph in Egypt, Moses leading the children. Wouldn't you love to ask Moses, with all that complaining? I mean, I'm not complaining, but 40 years of that with millions of people. Wouldn't you like to ask the Apostle Paul, what's the real reason John Mark left on that first journey? And then the greatest thrill, seeing Jesus and communing with God, having an eternity, to have all of your questions and all of what might be a mystery to you answered. In conclusion, many reasons why we should believe the Bible, just overwhelming reasons. But there are also some great reasons why we should want to believe it and be glad that we do, and be grateful to God that we do. It teaches the dignity of mankind. We're not dogs. We're not higher form of animals. It elevates us over all creation. We literally are the keepers of the planet. It gives purpose to our existence. It answers the why we are here, along with where we came from. And then it gives hope of life after death, and really indescribable joy. It's hard to even say how heaven is great and promised to be. But we can believe God in his promises, because God never fails, that it will be more unsearchable in its riches than we can ever truly imagine. Hoping today this may focus us a little bit, again, why we should want it, why we're so glad we believe it, and perhaps even reinforce our intention to live faithfully in the remaining days that God gives us. Thank you.